There are lots of things that make Frieren a special show, but at the forefront of its tone is the way it uses space. At times, Frieren has been described as more of a slice of life than a fantasy adventure, but that doesn't stop it from dipping into fantastic action-packed sequences. But with the second season airing and it only being 10 episodes, expectations have started to play a major factor, because space is a lot harder to utilize when there's tons of pressure to be amazing. But a step back at the right time can be exactly what a show needs. And I think that's exactly what the third episode of the second season is, one that runs in shocking parallel to its counterpart a season before. Welcome to the second season of Exploring Frieren. My name is Pei, and today we're talking about when slow is sometimes necessary. Today someone posted a comment that echoed a point I feel like I've seen multiple times, essentially arguing that there are two levels to Frieren, the surface level, which is cozy and comfy, and the second, which offers more philosophical depth, the exploration of the human condition, and pretty severe emotional growth. And there was a post on Twitter recently that I was sent from a creator named Rima, who I'm not very familiar with. However, I think they argued their point very eloquently. They stated, quote, "I don't think Frieren lacks tension. I think it avoids visible tension. Frieren is often misunderstood as just a comfy anime, but it's really slow burn angst packaged as one. Its main theme is realizing what you've lost only years, sometimes decades after the matter. The tension isn't loud or confrontational, it lives in the waiting, in the remembering, in the understanding that arrives too late to change anything, and that's what makes it tragic. It's also deeply realistic. We rarely understand the consequences of our actions in real time. Meaning is often assigned retroactively, if it's assigned at all. That kind of clarity requires contemplation, and many people never stop long enough to reach it. Frieren does. That's why the contemplative slow pace isn't accidental. It mirrors how time passes for Frieren herself, long uneventful stretches punctuated by moments of sudden emotional clarity. Frieren doesn't lack emotion, she lacks urgency. By the time she understands what something meant, it is already past. There's more to the tweet and I'll link it in the description below, but I think the core of this argument is really sound. I do think Frieren is a comfy show, especially on the surface, but I also don't think it hides at all from serious emotional tension and struggle, touching on and exploring deeply introspective questions. That's why I think so often this show feels so slow, but also packed full of interesting things to talk about and explore. Despite what it seems, Frieren is not my personal favorite media, but it does make me want to think. Every episode leads to me wanting to share my opinions, perspectives, and have conversations specifically about what went on. Sometimes media isn't just an individual experience, but also a shared one. And I think Frieren encourages that immensely, and I get to be part of it, not only in its quality, but also its content. Which leads to episode 3 of season 2, one that felt slow and deliberate, filled with things to talk about. There are 3 major components of the third episode of the second season that I want to focus on today. The first is expectations, the second is its structure, and the third is its tone. Something I've argued multiple times in the past is the difficulty that comes with following up a masterpiece. Have you noticed this trend with shows, movies, and games where when they first initially release and are underdogs and overperform, they're hyped beyond belief? But come award season, their oversaturation has led to them kind of falling into the incumbent position. And now as the frontrunners, there's this general shift in perception. It's easy to root for the underdog, but as things shift around a piece of media, completely independent of the media itself, online perception can change drastically. This is often exaggerated by small groups of incredibly vocal people on the internet. There are many examples that come to mind of this phenomenon, like the popular game Dispatch, the Oscar-winning Everything Everywhere All at Once, or the initially renowned and later oversaturated HBO's The Last of Us. So often when media is treated like an underdog, it's then hyper-romanticized, oversaturated, and then people get tired of it. And the weirdest part of this is very often has nothing to do with the actual content of the media itself. Saturation and expectations are dangerous double-edged swords. And I think given the pressure of wanting to cover each episode weekly as they air Frieren's second season, I find myself falling into that kind of toxic viewer category. As I revisit these episodes with reduced expectations and pressure, my interpretation of them shifts slightly, especially towards the positive. And I think this episode's a really good example of that. Each week I kind of do a unscientific poll asking my audience what they thought of the episode, and I expected this one specifically to underperform. And so far it has actually scored lower. But there are many in the comment section praising it as an all-time favorite, something that'll hold up especially in retrospect. And in my second watch through, I think that's true. Media that's praised for being outstanding because of its subtlety tends to have a difficult time living up to the hype of audience discussion. First-time viewers want to be blown away, but instead it functions as a slow burn. And I think that's how I feel about this episode. And to explain why, I think we should start by looking at its structure, specifically focusing on the interesting parallels between it as the third episode of the second season and its counterpart, the third episode of the first season. Both of these episodes have a lot of structural overlap, consisting of an introduction, part A and part B, albeit they follow a slightly different order. Both episodes start with their opening, and then that classic date since Himmel's death, and then some establishing shots. Then we follow the party as they're walking and having a conversation that sets up the episode. Something that's really interesting is the pacing for all of this is essentially exactly the same. I wonder how many other episodes actually follow the same structure of specifically a minute of walking and talking as an introduction. But really what makes them similar is how they have the same part A and B, just in reverse order. Part A is a slow city section. The progress of time in Frieren is a bit all over the place, sometimes skipping huge chunks of time and then dedicating half an episode to just a single afternoon. In the third episode of the first season, we follow Fern as she stalks Frieren around the city. The introduction set up Frieren's actions is a bit peculiar, and as time goes on, we find out that Frieren's actually trying to celebrate Fern's birthday. And it all leads to this big emotional moment where characters are sitting at an overlook and having a heartfelt conversation. Part B actually is the inverse, some sort of adventure that leads to an action sequence and resolution. It starts by setting up a goal, whether or not it's getting to a hot spring or finishing a promise made to Himmel. They then introduce a monster, there's an action sequence, and then there's an epiphany or a realization paralleling the hero's party and their adventures previously and the current plotline, and in both cases really nailing the emotional delivery and teaching a lesson. There are multiple reasons why the parallels between these two episodes are really cool. The first obvious one being that they're the third episodes of their respective seasons. But the second is that this scene from season 2 is specifically referencing that birthday celebration from the previous season. It indicates obvious intention in that comparison, and also adds to the fantastic tone and emotional delivery of both episodes. Something that's a fundamental part of Frieren as a show at this point is the way they engage with both slow pacing and incredible density. Like I argued earlier in this video, I think Frieren's a show that's especially good at making audiences think, and that unique pacing heavily influences the story's tone. By sometimes skipping huge chunks of time and then lingering on moments that really matter, like the right afternoon meandering around a city, Frieren consistently utilizes writing choices that feel unique to this specific story. For me, my favorite component of most media I consume is built around the characters, and there's some really good examples of that from this episode in the second season. When Frieren gives the party the choice of going to the next village or exploring the mountain to find this secret hot spring, Stark makes a request to go on this little adventure. Despite some pushback and reluctance, I think it's really cool that when Stark voices that he wants this, Frieren and Fern are pretty willing to give it a shot. I think one of the biggest lessons from the part B of the second season episode, which happens to be the first part, I know, confusing, which is an idea I really believe in, the value of challenge and discomfort. Sometimes experiences are so valuable because they're difficult, because they're uncomfortable. When the party does find that hot spring and shares that beautiful view together, part of the beauty in that experience is the context, the difficulty leading into it and after, the fact that they had to go out of their way to find it. Experiences especially are influenced by perception. While some things lean more towards the objective, a million things can influence someone's experience. Whether it's shared or the byproduct of hard work, there's tons of reasons why limitations make for great adventures. This applies both to storytelling and life. But I think the biggest reason this scene hits so hard is because of the reason why Stark wanted to go on this side adventure. Sharing a memory from his childhood where Eisen recounts just how terrible the experience was and how he wouldn't trade it for the world. The ups and downs of challenges and beauty are part of what makes them so dear. But from a tonal standpoint, part of the reason I love this episode so much is because when you take a step back, take a deep breath, and slow things down, you're given opportunities in a story that you otherwise wouldn't have. I love how this episode specifically gives Eisen and Hyder their flowers, which I think leads to the second part of this episode's tone that's really significant. It felt deeply optimistic, easy, and fun. There were a lot of notable changes that were especially present in this episode between Season 1 and 2's animation, which are likely a byproduct of changing directors or limitations behind the scenes that we don't have much access to, some of which were really sticky and bothersome to me. I have a whole video that I'm writing about that, I won't linger on it. But those same changes felt like a double-edged sword to me. There were multiple viral scenes that people adored, Frierin's tantrum being the obvious one, playing into the fact that this episode was overwhelmingly fun without losing sight of this kind of underlying meaning and significance. I love the scene where Stark asks Fern on a date. She drops her book, she forgets to close the door. I think it's really fun to see someone so reserved be so expressive and flustered. I think it adds a lot to both Stark and Fern's dynamic, and specifically her character. And I love when Stark goes to Frieren for advice, she's able to bestow all this information, teaching him about who Fern is as a person. And then Frieren revealing that it wasn't her who sourced it, rather the expression of Hyder's deep care and love for Fern. And the part that I like most about this is what it implies about episode 3 of the first season. That when Fern was uncomfortable and adjusting and didn't know how Frieren felt about her, Frieren knew all the right things to do to celebrate her birthday because of Hyder. I love when stories do things that feel kind of like a retcon, and instead of taking away from the story, it actually makes it better. It's so hard to do, and Frieren keeps getting away with it, because that third episode makes more sense now with the information we have today than when it aired. And it's really beautiful.